So, ladies and gentlemen, Vanguard Zombies is finally done. The final DLC 4 map, the Archon, released today. Me and my team finished it in a couple of hours, and I realized finally now the game is actually over. We can say with confidence and all certainty that Vanguard Zombies is completely behind us. You know, originally I was going to make an Easter egg tutorial for the Archon and show you guys like how to get here and everything and do this boss fight, but I realized nobody actually cares. I asked my chat, they didn't even want me to make a guide, so I decided, you know what, I'm going to do something else instead. I'm going to do a bit of a retrospective of Vanguard. Now, some of you will know I already made an autopsy review, and I made that about 4 months ago, closer to 5 at this point, but in that video, I just went into the specifics about, like, what happened to Vanguard Zombies and why, like, the Anfang and Terra Maledicta stuff just didn't work, and, like, basically, we just talked about why the game died and why it's bad, and I'm not really going to do that too much in this video because it's already been said, and I've gone through a lot of that stuff, so if you want to, you know, hear my take in that video, I recommend go watching that. This is just going to be a more of a whole year retrospective to find out, like, you know, where we started to where we ended up, because this year has just been so frustrating with this game. It's just like so many things that, like, I just are so tone deaf and they don't understand. And you know what game, though, isn't frustrating? This video is sponsored by Royal Match. Royal Match is just a classic 3-puzzle style mobile game that's totally free and you can play on or offline. If you're tired of modern mobile games spamming you with ads, Royal Match is an ad-free game, so you can just sit back, relax, and focus on saving the king, solve puzzles, and help him escape in this very relaxed puzzler. So be sure to check out Royal Match today. You can play it for yourself and download it using the link in the description. Thank you to Royal Match for sponsoring this video. Since I made my original autopsy, the game has had 2 more maps released, and they're totally different to the original 2, I guess, that came with the game, if you want to say it that way. And I do gotta apologize, I don't have like a pre-prepared script for this video. I'm going to be speaking very off the cuff, and this will be the last time I talk about Vanguard Vanguard Zombies until I review the full game of Call of Duty Vanguard, and in that case, I'll do a thorough review of everything. But until then, I just wanted to take today as a bit of a like year journey retrospective to figure out really how we got to this place we ended up. At the beginning of last year, or I guess the season of Vanguard, we had the release of Anfang. We all thought that, like, before it came out, it was going to be sort of Sledgehammer's take on the Outbreak style of gameplay that Cold War brought to the table. However, the more I look at it, I don't even think Anfang can even be compared to Outbreak. Even though they're, like, objective games, they're not even remotely similar. And Anfang was clearly supposed to be this, like, vision that never got articulated. It was going to be a significantly more expanded experience than what we currently have on disc, right? There's going to be more objectives, I'm sure better boss enemies, like actual Easter eggs and boss fights and all that sort of stuff. And it just hit me when I was thinking about this. Anfang made the worst impression of any zombies map ever, or any game that's launched. So, like, even the less popular games like World War II Zombies, for example, launched with the Final Reich. And ironically, the Final Reich is the strongest map on that game and made a pretty solid impression, at least initially. The DLC gets a bit all over the place, but at least it made a solid first impression. There has not been a zombies game that has had a worst start off or, like, got off on the wrong foot harder than Vanguard, and Anfang was the most tone-deaf thing to release. Not only was Anfang, like, horribly unoptimized and barely even worked and had no features at launch, what they did add later didn't really do anything to mitigate that. You know, YouTubers in the beginning, including myself, thought that they were going to quickly pick up the pieces and get this thing up to speed of where it probably should have been in a launch state, and it just didn't get there. But even if it did get up to speed, let's say, like it had maybe an actual main Easter egg, it had, you know, some better boss enemies, maybe an actual main boss fight, and there was things to do in it, I still don't think it would have helped at all. And why? I think Anfang is basically the only map in Zombies history that has got zombies wrong. And what I mean is, like, getting the fundamentals of what Call of Duty Zombies is incorrect. You can even hear them talk about it in trailers. Like, we mentioned this before, but they talk about how instead of, you know, the zombies surrounding you and bringing the fight to you, you bring it to them, which it's just like, it's not the point. It's so off base that in hindsight, I literally don't even think if Anfang launched in a more functional state with more content, I don't think it would have helped all that much. It still would have been regarded as a quite low tier experience. No amount of additional content on top of that would have been able to mask the fact fact that it got zombies wrong. Anfang will forever be a stain on the reputation of zombies that will never go away, and I mean that literally. The tortured path in World War II is still a meme, and for good reason. Up until this point, the tortured path was by far the worst experience in zombies, and while I would say there are parts of the tortured path that are just as bad as Anfang, all things considered, now that if we look at World War II and Vanguard next to each other as a whole package, I would still prefer to play World War II zombies at this point. I don't know if I truly saw it at the time, but looking back at it now, I think Anfang was shot from the start. The foundation of it was completely wrong, and it's like no amount of additional content, any updates to it would have actually helped the core issue, that it was just built on a rocky foundation. And God, it would have been nice if somebody at Activision or somebody at Treyarch or Sledgehammer looked at Anfang immediately and said, no, this is not what we're doing. Like, I don't know what this experience is, but this isn't going to fly, and they course corrected very quickly after that, but they didn't. A couple months down the road, we got the release of Terra Maledicta, and this was just as bad as Anfang, if not worse, because the map is just significantly bigger and more thin and spread out, and there's virtually nothing to do. There's almost the same amount of content as Anfang, same structure, same format. It came across as so unbelievably tone deaf, and anyone who still believed in a course-corrected future of this game had their hopes and dreams immediately crushed beneath them. And at this point was when I made my autopsy review, because as soon as I saw a second map being the same structure, I'm like, okay, clearly this, like, they're just throwing the same thing at the wall over and over again and expecting it to work. And, you know, that's when I made my review and I said I was going to be done with it. And I'm like, okay, we need a big course correction or it's not going to happen. And I kid you not, one day after I posted that autopsy review, Sledgehammer Games announced that they were literally remaking the game from the ground up and that zombies content was going to take a little, you know, longer to come out and we weren't going to get that much for a long time. So my memory's a little fuzzy here, but I think in between like seasons like 2, 3, and 4, we didn't get like anything. There was a really big dry period for Vanguard, which, you know, again, was sort of to be expected because we weren't expecting a whole lot anyways after Anfang and Terra Maledicta. But in the meantime, there wasn't even a whole lot of meaningful additions to either of those experiences. In fact, with the release of this newest map, Terra Maledicta has been rendered completely pointless. It has absolutely nullified its existence, but I'll get to that in a second. The problem was we had to live with Vanguard having the most embarrassing trash of a zombies offering in a Call of Duty game ever. Like, you know, there's some other embarrassing trash in other games, but as far as those being the only things you can play, the thing that zombies usually gets right at least is the map on disc. Not always, but most of the time. And with this game, the map on disc was awful, probably the worst thing you've maybe ever played, and then the DLC 1 map, let's say, is the exact same thing, just maybe even worse, I don't know. Point is, nobody cared to play this, and I would love to see the player count numbers during this time. Like I said, that span between seasons 2, 3, and 4, roughly, I would have loved to see player counts for Anfang and Terra Maledicta. They were probably abysmally bad. And look, I'm not trying to be mean to any devs that have worked on this experience. Like, I'm sure they wanted to make it as good as they can. It was either maybe a combination of, like, misguidance or budget or time. Maybe all of those things, I'm not sure. I'm not trying to be mean to any of them as people. I'm just saying, like, I don't know how anybody actually sat down and played these things and were like, yeah, that was fun. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think anybody has sat down and was like, yo, that was a really fun experience. It's like, we have to get this out because Activision. You know what I mean? Even if it sucks, we don't want it to suck. I'm sure the devs don't actively want it to be terrible, but it's like, we have to get this thing out, even though it's clearly not fun. So after this long drought in the year where we basically had nothing, and I was over it, like I wasn't even thinking about Vanguard Zombies anymore. After I made that autopsy review, that was like the last time I even cared to think about it. But we then got information that they were going back to traditional round-based maps, and then that Numa was going to be releasing with a fully blown Easter egg and like all this content and all this really exciting stuff. And, you know, based on my previous experience with Vanguard, I was expecting the absolute worst. I thought this was going to be, you know, the embarrassing nightmare that everything prior to it had been. And I have to say, Numa, while it's not perfect, I was pleasantly surprised about how good it ended up being. I will say this, they should have just developed this map for Cold War zombies and put it on there. This would have slapped way harder, the systems would have been better, and I think people would have been more excited and probably had more players, but regardless, they decided to put it on Vanguard. But all things considered, it plays a lot like a Cold War map, and the Easter egg is actually pretty excellently designed, and I cannot believe I'm actually saying that. The boss fight is, somewhat lackluster. It's fine, but all things considered, it's Numa. You've played it before. If you played World at War, or hell, any zombies game in history from Treyarch, you've probably played Numa over a dozen times at this point, but this version of it was like, sure, it looks a little better, and there's a lot to do in it, and granted, the things that it has to do are fun. It can get repetitive, yes, but this was a really, good step in the right direction, and I'm like, wow, could you have just launched with this? I don't understand the thought process of, why don't we start with this, Numa, more traditional round-based experience? It's nothing groundbreaking. It's actually nothing that exciting, and I'm sure people still would have dumped on it when it launched, because it's like, wow, we've already played this map before. You really just re-released a map that was made in 2008. Sure, people would have had their criticisms, but when I look at that compared to Anfang, Numa is an insanely different experience for Vanguard, and it was a really solid step in the right direction. I just wish to God they would have launched with something like that, and it just baffles me that they didn't, and they had to course correct this basically 6-7 months into the game's life cycle when 90% of the player base had already dipped. I just don't know what the hell they were thinking when designing Anfang. In retrospect now, especially when you consider that they were capable of making something like Numa using the same set of tools that Anfang is functioning with, they developed this actually pretty solid zombies experience. Maybe I don't love the engine and a lot of the mechanics, but the map itself and the quest is what I would actually consider to be good. The fact that that was possible, yet they launched with Anfang, I'm done losing sleep over it. It is such a shame, because Vanguard Zombies, I'm sure, had people actually liked this game, we would have seen 10 times more content for. Probably Cold War level or even beyond of that. I know there was there was grief mode planned for this game. There was all kinds of interesting game modes and more wonder weapons and boss enemies, and they had a lot of stuff planned for Vanguard, but because it was an unmitigated disaster on launch, all of that stuff went out the window, and I'm not even sure making this Numa round-based map was in the original plan. In fact, I highly doubt it, but the fact that they were able to cobble that together and it wasn't a complete disaster is at least kind of impressive, and that's the only saving grace of the zombies mode, relatively speaking, at least for now. A lot of people ask me at this point in the year, hey, Numa's pretty good, or at least it appears to be, is the game worth buying? And I would always tell people, if you're only buying Vanguard to play Numa specifically, no. While it's a good map, don't buy the entire game for it. That's absolutely not worth it. If you're not going to play Anfang and Terra Maledicta and enjoy those, which you're not going to, spoiler alert, don't play it. If you own the game, sure, it's worth playing, but don't spend money on it specifically for this experience, which is a real shame, because had the game launched with that, I may have even said yes. But DLC 4, I don't even want to call these DLC. The last map we got for Vanguard, like I said, came out today. Just got done playing it, the Archon. This follows in the footsteps of Numa as being a round-based map formula for this experience. And, where is this map? Where does this take place? You'll never guess. The Archon as a map is, it is literally Terra Maledicta. Yes, it's the map that already exists in the game. They re-released the same map as a different experience, but this time it has a green filter over it, so you can see the air and the atmosphere is a little bit different. I wish I was joking. Seriously, it is the same map that we played 2 DLC ago, I guess, but with a green filter over the air, and that is it. Perks are in the exact same spot. It's the same layout, but the difference is this map has a Easter egg and a boss fight, and it's clear that, what's funny? Now that I think about it, they could have just updated Terra Maledicta to have all this stuff. The base mechanics are already there. They literally just could have said, hey, this final update is a boss fight added to Terra Maledicta, but because the reputation of that is so shot, they had to re-release the map under a different name so that they didn't have to use the words Terra Maledicta. That's how you know it's true. You already know, Anfang was going to have some other updates, and they planned to make that a living, breathing experience and, release these kinds of things into that map. But then that would require them to say the words Anfang in their updates and stuff. So they said, to hell with that, and we're releasing the Archon. Now, I have to say, the map is you know, boring. It's Terra Maledicta as far as layout. The Easter egg is okay. It's not as strong as Numa's Easter egg, but the boss fight, you know, surprisingly is pretty cool. You fight Cortifex, and you can tell that 90% of the dev time went, and budget as well, went into this boss fight. And they even say that on Twitter. They're like, yo, this map is going to be ass, and we're letting you know right now. But the boss fight is where we spent 90% of our time. And you can tell they did. Like, the boss fight's actually good. I'm not just saying that. It is a good boss fight. It's not perfect, and it's not the best. Like, it's not nearly on the level of Mephistopheles from Infinite Warfare, for example, in terms of the like perfection of its design and the skill required to approach it. But if this is an example of Sledgehammer or Treyarch or whoever slapping together a boss fight, because from what I understand, this was put together in a pretty short amount of time, and I also do believe Treyarch themselves did work on this. It wasn't just Sledgehammer. This was pretty good. Like, I think this is a solid foundation for boss fights that we might see in the future. And it's crazy because, like, it might actually be the last boss fight for a long time. And, you know, truly, I hope it is for a bit, because this whole year has just been so ridiculously annoying and toxic and stressful that, like, you know, it kind of needed to happen because it really helped me improve my real life, and I talked about that in my autopsy. Like, it actually helped me get a lot of things together in my own personal life, and I'm not just saying that. And it also helped me, you know, find a new style of content that I'm really enjoying and that works, and that doesn't mean I have to rely specifically on one thing. Because it's like, if this is the last map we're getting for 2 years as projected what's going to be happening, if we don't get like a standalone zombies game or something in 2023, Treyarch's next game is in 2024, so we have a long time to wait. But that's what I think we need. We need a refresher. We need a breath of fresh air. We need to close the book on zombies for a little while and just, you know, settle down for a bit. It's so weird looking at this as like a finalized product now. Like, this is it. And as far as I'm concerned, this is the #1 game that is the most Frankenstein slapped together project ever. Like, obviously, this was going to be a lot different had the original plan for this game played out. This is not at all the Vanguard we were supposed to get. Maybe this one is hopefully better than maybe what we were supposed to get, but I guess we'll never really know. But between this video and my autopsy, I finally can put Vanguard Zombies, as it were, to rest. The only time I'm ever going to talk about this again is when I review it in full, when I review the entire game of Call of Duty Vanguard, and that will be coming probably sometime in the next couple months. But until then, we now have the final product of Vanguard, and this is how it ended up being. So I really hope everybody can learn something from this experience, players and developers alike. I think we all have a lot to take away from this entire situation. This was the weirdest Zombies has ever been. Like, you know, I would also say it's the worst for sure, but it's certainly the weirdest it's ever been this year. Like I mentioned before, even the more controversial Zombies games in the past, you know, World War II, Infinite Warfare, Black Ops 4, that kind of stuff, they were still kind of like almost split right down the middle in terms of community reception. It was like politics, you know, just right down the middle. But with Vanguard, there is nobody still defending this game. Like, you know, there's people that will say, oh, Numa is pretty good, and maybe the Archon boss fight's pretty good. Like, there's redeeming elements of this, but, like, as a whole package, there is nobody left that actively defends this game, unless they're just trying to be contrarians for the sake of it. There's nobody that sits down and unironically enjoys playing this every day of their life. It just doesn't happen. This is the most unified the Zombies community has ever been in this sense, and I don't think it'll ever be this unified again. I mean, like, we're unified for a negative reason, and so maybe that's not great, but, like, you know, the next Zombies game is going to come out, and it's going to be, like, politics right down the middle again, but at least we can take this moment in time where, like, the Zombies community was together on something, which is pretty insane to me. But that's all I got for you guys, and I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you all in the next one.